All right there, Super Bowl bound Sean McVay. Man, I mean, we got a little history. First off, back in the day, this guy used to sit at the lunch table with me at training camp.
I'll never forget how good you were to me. I had just finished up playing ball. I come in there. I don't know anybody at the beginning of training camp. And you were great to me, man. But those are the things you always remember. You know, the way that people treat you and the way you treated me, that always stuck with me. And, that's why we're friends to this day.
Thanks, man. Thanks a lot. All right, so I want to get into some things here. You know, of course, really want to start from basically a year ago.
Yeah.
Here we are, a week before the Super Bowl. But a year ago, this time was one of the big, changing moments of your football team. Matt Stafford, all right? And that's where I just want to go.
Yeah.
What was first off for you, the light bulb moment to know that, okay, I might need a little bit of a change at that position, or we got to do something else at the quarterback position?
Really, Chris, what ended up happening was you see that, he had gone and talked to ownership, and they gave him permission to seek a trade.
Gotcha.
So you're saying, all right, when does a guy like this really become available? You don't know exactly what the parameters are going to be, but then, Brad Holmes going there as the GM, there was some immediate connections. And,
right.
We're in Cabo. I'm out there with, my fiance and Whitworth and his family. We're literally watching the NFC Championship games. We're kind of out by the pool, enjoying that. And Stafford had been texting with Clint Boland, who was a former teammate of Whitworth's. He said, oddly enough, Stafford is actually coming out to the same exact resort we were staying at. And you're like, everybody thinks it's all fixed and stuff like that, but
right.
It organically occurred. He ends up coming in with his wife and some friends, that day. And, we started hitting it off and, just talking ball, hanging out. It was the best organic free agent visit you could ever really have. And then you start saying, okay, is this a realistic possibility?
Yeah.
And I think things accelerated faster than anybody thought. But, that was really the start of it. And just getting to know him and the way he's wired and why his teammates have always loved him, coaches. And then you start studying the film. I'd always appreciated him from afar, when you cross over. But when you're really watching him, like, okay, let's really watch the intricacies of the game, the way he sees it, the way he's able to move and
right.
Manipulate the pocket and coverage contours, all the throws he can make. I mean, the guy's special. He really is. We've talked about this.
Yeah, no, I know it is. So that's where I'm shocked. First off, it seemed like the fix was in with Brad Holmes going there, but this was already kind of on the radar from his standpoint a little bit. And then it kind of just grew from there. When Brad Holmes went there, it became more of a real possibility.
It really was. I think he had that conversation, with Mrs. Ford beforehand. And, when Brad got there, they knew that was, okay, probably when he and Dan Campbell got there, I think that was something that they knew. All right, we had kind of, given him the thumbs up that he could seek a trade. And so that dialogue started. I don't think the timeline that it actually occurred was what anybody anticipated, but it gets out, somebody ends up reporting that, hey, the Rams are interested, and that accelerated the talks, much faster than anybody anticipated. A lot of other teams kind of tried to get involved, and, fortunately for us, the Lions had real interest in acquiring Jared because of the success that he had. And then it was figuring out the parameters, to have an owner like Mr. Kroenke that was so willing to, say, hey, we felt like this was a chance to upgrade our team and wanted to be able to do that, not minimizing all the good things that Jared had done, but felt like it was a rare opportunity, and it came together a lot faster than anybody could have ever imagined.
It's amazing. Nothing comes together that fast in the NFL.
No, it really doesn't.
It really doesn't. I want to get into just a little bit like you studying him, because the perception is Matt Stafford, it's all stats. He can't win a big game. He turns the ball over in big moments. I know I've been a defender of him.
Totally.
But when you turn the film on, just give me some of those first few thoughts when you went, oh my gosh, I'm looking a little deeper into this guy.
Yeah, I think the thing that really stood out to me is the most difficult time to play quarterback are in those known passing situations.
Right.
Whether you're 2 minute end of the half, end of the game, or you're coming from behind, the third downs, and that to me is when he shined his brightest. I thought in the red area as well, the tight window throws, but you just watch, just the feel for the position. And I think when you have to play the quarterback position in those known passing situations, that's the most difficult. And defense is in an advantage. They're able to tee off. They can, provide a bunch of different looks. And I thought he really shined, whether it was man coverage, whether it was zone coverage, understanding how to move and manipulate people, and just playing the position at an elite level in those most difficult spots is really what resonated and what I thought shined through when you start watching the film. And, he elevates people around him. The other thing that I love is you just watch the way his linemen respond when he makes a play or they're going to help him up.
No doubt.
He's just got, I'll tell you what, he's got a lot more shit in his neck than I think a lot of people realize.
Yeah, right,
He's a great competitor. I think we've seen that throughout the playoffs. You look at how excited he got in Tampa, and talking about stealing people's souls. And, I think, he's got such a great even-keeled demeanor when he's talking to the media. But as a competitor, and I love the fact that he and I are close enough to go back and forth at one another in a healthy banter. And so, that's what you want. We're close enough to be real with one another. And then we move on, and he's a very strong-minded guy. He's got a great way about himself. He's one of the most emotionally intelligent players I've ever been around. Just to authentically connect with his teammates, and he knows how to do it in a way that brings people together. He's special. There's no chance we'd be in this position without him.
Yeah. All right. So, first off, the banter, you got me there. So he's yelled at you a few times.
Oh, yeah.
Little Rich Gannon, John Gruden-esque kind of thing.
I don't know about all that.
That went across the line.
But we, what? It's healthy because we care about each other so much. And I think there's something to be said for being comfortable to disagree with one another and come to a solution. And he's the one out there, and he's got such a great feel. Like, what I love as much as anything about him is how quickly he's able to correct himself. He recognizes the information that he gives you coming off. He doesn't need to wait to look at the pictures to confirm what's going on.
Yeah,
and he's got such great capacity. He uses all the inventory that he gathers, whether it's, previously from his experience that he's gathered from Detroit or even this year, or just in the moment. And it's been invaluable to me to be able to get to certain things. And his feedback, he truly is an extension of the coaching staff on the grass.
So you guys push each other.
Yeah.
You definitely have an open dialogue, and you have enough confidence in his knowledge that you sit back and think about the things he says to you and really take it to heart.
It's impressive, Chris.
Yeah.
The thing that you appreciate so much about a coach is when you're around players that push you to get better because you want to have answers, or they see things, or they point out things that maybe you would miss otherwise. And I'm a better coach for having worked with this guy.
Yeah.
The way he sees it, the way he goes about his preparation, how consistent he is. And I think it's so valuable to be able to have somebody that won't just agree with you all the time, but, they'll challenge you, or, hey, I might see it through a little bit different lens. And it truly is a collaboration that we have, and Kevin O'Connell's a big part of that, and some of our other players. But Matthew's ownership and the ability to kind of just be able to collaborate over this last year has been instrumental in our success. And he's elevated everybody around him, and guys love him.
It seems that way. Like you're a psycho, and I mean that in a good way. The football psycho.
In a good way.
Were you a kid in the candy store? The first few throws you saw on the practice field, you were like, oh my gosh, I can run this play or that play? Or, what did it feel like as the play designer, knowing you got a guy that's really got one of the greatest arms in the history of football?
Yeah, there's no limitations.
Right.
And then, for him to have the ability to communicate, because you're watching a lot of stuff too. I thought Detroit did a lot of really good things offensively that's maybe a little bit different flavor or genre than what we've done here.
Right.
But if he's executing at a high level, and his ability to be able to basically take it from a coach's perspective, how am I progressing? How am I reading this based on the variety of coverages? What's the intent behind it? I just am so impressed with his ability. We always talk about, hey, let's call the play. Let's understand the intent of the play, the mechanics, and then ultimately be able to solve the problems.
Yeah.
And he could do all those things with a lot of the stuff that he had done in Detroit. You're studying him, but then when you talk to him about it, and we've implemented a lot of those things. And then watching how quickly he's taken on, some of the concepts that we've run, whether it's the keeper game, the play passes, some of the drop back concepts, and the ownership, and the ability to be able to kind of push and pull and figure out what's, it doesn't matter who's right, it matters what's right.
Right.
And I think, it's been a really good thing. It's been a fun kind of problem solve, but I don't think he's getting enough, recognition for what a transition he's made. When you think about it, was a year ago or a little over a year ago that we're really just meeting, let alone meeting his teammates, moving his family across the country, learning a brand new system, new protection calls. And his recall from the different systems too. I can't even remember what we called stuff, when I was in Washington, and because now we've transitioned.
I doubt that. You probably remember.
But just the different vernacular with the different coordinators, all of whom I have a tremendous amount of respect for. It's like, this guy, he is so much smarter and more intelligent than anybody else realizes, and he's one of the best competitors I've ever been around. If you say, hey, what are you looking for in a quarterback? I couldn't be more grateful to be with this guy.
Yeah, that's awesome. I could see his influence on your offense.
Yes.
There has been a few plays where I study and I go, I've never seen McVay run this drop back pass on third down. So that's really cool. That's a credit to you. The other thing, I guess what I want to go into a little bit is, we all thought we were seeing the old Matthew Stafford in the middle of the year when it was the turnovers. And it was, oh no, it's Matthew Stafford from Detroit struck again. How did he kind of fight through that? How did you fight through that? You seemed like you continued to have great confidence and just let it fly with him.
No question. Well, number one, he was unfazed by it. And you know, too, Chris, like, everybody's going to always pin those turnovers on the quarterback. There was a couple that we got to make better decisions, but those certainly were not exclusively on him.
Right.
Some spots, I put him in some bad spots. Sometimes it was a tip ball, or he's letting it go with anticipation, and we're not exactly where we need to be in the rhythm and timing.
Yeah.
But I just think that 3-game stretch where you're 7-1, you lose 3 in a row, you know, and really we went a month without winning because our bye was in between that.
Right.
And I thought his ability to just stay the course, stay confident, his teammates never wavered in their confidence in him. I know I never did. He didn't in himself. And you could really see with that Jacksonville game, and then really, you know, up until the Week 18 game, but I thought he played incredible against the Niners, willing himself.
Yeah.
Some of the conversions he made on third down with, you know, some pressure in his face. And he's played really good football. He's made great decisions. And I think there's a difference between playing smart football and scared football. And he is not playing in the least bit scared. I mean, he's letting things rip with, you know, the rhythm and timing, but also anticipation. And a lot of guys wouldn't do that, but I think that's a credit to the competitor, the trust that he has with his teammates, and you know, he's elevated everybody, and I think he's played his best ball in the playoffs.
It seems like it. It seems like your team's come together at the right time here and really starting to hit the pinnacle of what they're capable of.
I think there's no question about it, and that's what you want to do. That's what you're always striving to do. You know, the other thing people don't talk enough about is, you know, when you're the quarterback and you talk about, you know, the rapport that you want to establish. He and Cooper have an incredible rapport, but when you lose a player of Robert Woods' caliber and then you bring Odell in, I think it's such a credit to he and Odell watching the rapport they've been able to establish. When Higbee's been right, it's been great, but there's been a lot of moving parts that he's seamlessly just kind of handled that I don't know that a lot of other guys could, and we've put a lot on his plate, and he's handled it great.
A lot on his plate, but a lot on your plate. That's where I'm amazed by you. I really am, in the fact of the stars, all the personalities you got here. And never really any, you know, ruffled feathers. Everybody loves it.
Yeah.
What is it about you, the culture you set here, your coaching staff, that can bring all these high-profile celebrities, really, NFL celebrities, into this building, and they become selfless?
I think the first thing is we got a great veteran locker room. We got great leaders in there that want to win. You know, and I think the other thing too is when you come in this building, we care about football, and it's truly a collaboration. It's coaches and players working as one. We're willing to listen, and all these players that we've brought in are smart guys with great resume that like football. They're great competitors. And I think that's all you can ask, is to be put in a situation where you're going to be positively pushed, but you're going to be respected in the way that we push you. You know, it's kind of the cliche, but we talk about, hey, let's have some urgency, but let's enjoy the way we go about it. And we're never going to be demeaning, but we're going to be demanding, and we're all going to be accountable. You know, I think the biggest thing is when mistakes occur, I want everybody's first reaction to be, let me look first inward and how I can do a better job within the framework of my role. And I think you've seen that, whether it be with our players. Our best players set the tone. I can remember when my grandpa, I asked him when I was a little kid, you know, why do you guys think you were so successful in San Fran for such a long period of time, where they go to 5, they win 5? And he said, that's easy. Our best players were the most accountable. They upheld the standard, and that became the norm for what was expected day in and day out.
Right.
And that's what we've got here.
Yeah.
You know, that's what we've got with all of our captains are, you know, the best examples of what personifies what's right about the Rams. You look at Aaron Donald and what he's meant to this organization. You look at Whitworth. You look at the way that Stafford's come in here. You look at the ascension of Cooper Kupp, what Robert Woods has meant to us. You know, you see these guys do such a great job. Jalen Ramsey's, you know, asserted himself as a great leader. And then I couldn't be more grateful for the juice, the swag, the production that both Vaughn and Odell have brought to our team. And I think they're coming together at the right time, but it's about the players.
I mean, you're right. Your grandfather, I mean, yeah, Jerry Rice, Ronnie Lott, those are pretty good examples. I hear what you're saying there. Like, all right, so what goes into the research of some of these guys? Jalen Ramsey, volatile corner, he wants more money.
Yeah.
You know, Von Miller is getting up there in age. I don't know if he's a superstar he once was. Odell.
Right.
Oh, man, he's a misfit. He ruins every team he's on. You know, how much research do you do on these guys prior to acquiring them? And then, you know, or do you just go, you know what, I think I can make it work? How does that work?
Yeah, you know what, I think, you know, first of all, you know a lot of these players already.
Right.
You know, because the fortunate thing about being out here in LA, guys want to spend some time out here. So I've been able to have some interaction with Vaughn, with Odell, where you get to know, hey, I feel like these are good dudes that are the right kind of people that are great competitors.
Right.
You know, I want guys that are great competitors, you know, that have some stuff to them like we talked about.
Yeah.
And as long as there can be that shared ownership and that mutual respect, we're going to give respect. We expect it the same way. And those guys have come in and done a great job. But I think you feel good about it when the foundation is set the right way with the right leadership in place. And I'll tell you what, too, Chris, the outside-in narrative about being able to, you know, going all in and stuff like that, I think it's a fun narrative. We've never really looked at it like that. What I feel grateful for is we have an owner that's willing to trust a lot of the decisions, whether it's myself, Les, Kevin Demoff, Tony Pastors, that we feel like are in the best interests of the team. You're not minimizing, but I think there's just creative avenues of acquiring players that we've really explored. You know, you look at it, hey, if you feel like you've got a proven commodity, you know, and you can exchange some ones for them. Now, I know that, hey, when you get those guys at that number one spot, they're at a fixed salary that's much more feasible, but you've got a proven commodity.
It's potential in this still, though.
Exactly.
You don't know. Right.
And I think Les and his group and our coaches do a great job where we've had a lot of picks.
Right.
You know, we've had a lot of these guys that have asserted themselves as starting caliber players for us, or whether it's, you know, doing great things through the undrafted free agent market, you know, all those types of things. So there's other ways and avenues of acquiring and building a team. And even though we are, you know, a lot of teams would say you're top heavy and that can be volatile, and we're not naive to that, but our guys have delivered in a big way, and I think that's set the tone for the rest of the team. And those great ones, they make everyone around them better. I think that's the separator. And when you're around those great players like we've talked about, it elevates the rest of the team, and I think that's what you've seen this year especially.
So this is not a preconceived plan.
Yeah.
You're kind of just saying it's all happened organically, it sounds like, to where these guys become available and you and Les and Mr. Kroenke go, let's do it.
No question. And I think that the guys that you're talking about, it's rare circumstances that when do you ever have a player of Jalen Ramsey's caliber that's actually available via trade? Mm-hmm. You know, with the production, a guy that's an elite competitor, loves football. It doesn't come around. And you say, okay, if we can pair him with Aaron Donald, what does that really look like with his ability to be able to get home, what you can do with some of the different things in tilt and coverages and things of that nature. And I think you've really seen that illustrated the last couple of years. You know, for us to be able to, you know, have, you know, the ability to go get a Matthew Stafford, when does a guy like him actually really become available?
Right.
You know, not from free agency, but you're talking about via trade and where you can see some of the things that he's got an elite ability to do. And so all of these things have come up, and we want to be aggressive in our pursuit. But the all-in thing, I think the biggest thing that I would say is we always talk about, you know, going to attack and success, never being afraid to fail. And I think that you see that reflected in some of our approach of acquiring players. And, hey, it might not be for everybody. Do I know that sets you up for a lot of criticism if it doesn't work out? No doubt about it. But got to be able to, you know, trust the decisions you make and know that not everything works out, but if you think it's the best decision for your team and for the people that you love and care about, to try to go attack it the right way, you know, we're going to do it.
Yeah, I think the thing that I love is the future. You're not too far down the road in the future. You obviously don't worry about that too much.
Sure.
You know, your ability to blend people together, special. And then
I appreciate that.
You and Les, you must have supreme confidence in your ability to know you're going to find people in middle rounds. I don't know. That's what jumps out to me.
It's
you
been
got
impressive.
A lot of middle round guys on the team that contribute for sure.
I'll tell you what, over the 5 years that Les and I have been together, our relationship has gotten stronger. It's gotten better. And I think one of the things that always bonded us from the jump was we see the game through a very similar lens, and the types of players, the types of people that we want to onboard. And I think we've gotten better about being more specific and sequential in how that process it really is done to be able to, you know, have a higher percentage. Now, we all know it's not a perfect thing, but you at least feel like, all right, you've got the right types of guys that you know how to identify, guys that love football, that have the traits, the characteristics. And then there's certain guys that, hey, I don't care where you put Stafford or where you put Aaron Donald or the Ramseys of the world or Cooper Kupp, they're going to go succeed. But having some things that you're identifying where you can get players that fill voids, you know, based on the entirety of your roster.
Yeah. All right. So now let's get into this team this year now, right? We talked about all the fluff and all that. Like, at what point this year did you just go, all right, it's clicking? You know, was there a game, a moment that you look at, you know, with OBJ on the roster and everything, to where you go, all right, I think we got it. We got something here. Was there a light bulb moment for you?
I think this year has been a real journey, Chris.
Yeah.
I think when you look at from the very beginning of the year, starting out in Chicago, there was a lot of confidence that I had in this group. And I think where I gained the most confidence in them, not necessarily starting where there's a lot of fireworks and you end up starting out the season 7-1, but watching the resolve when we got to 7-4 and how we ended up reeling off a handful of wins in a row and finding different ways to do that, utilize the entirety of the roster. I think one of the moments that really stands out as a special moment that showed how mentally tough this team was on Monday Night Football against the Arizona Cardinals. You end up losing Jalen Ramsey and Tyler Higbee, two key members of our team, the day of. I'm getting ready to address the team on Monday, and we learned that they're out for COVID.
Right.
And the previous day, we had learned that a handful of other starters were missing, and guys stepped up. They rallied. There was no flinch, no blink, found a way to be able to get it done. And then I think the other moment was watching the immediate resolve that was demonstrated after we had a gut-wrenching, loss in Week 18 to the Niners.
Yeah.
You're up 17-0. They end up making it a 17-3 game. It was one of the first games where we ended up, not capitalizing on having a lead at halftime. And,
right.
That could be demoralizing to a lot of teams. But our guys stayed the course, played really well. I thought they played a really complete game against Arizona. And then the Tampa game, a lot of teams would have folded. You're up 27-3. Everything kind of working out, and give Tampa credit, they made those plays. But then to go 27-27, and then to watch what Matthew did with the offense, with 42 seconds left after the first play, he thinks he's going to go Michael Vick and run up the middle versus two-man.
That was hilarious.
Oh, yeah, it was not funny at the time, but we laugh about it now. But, there's just so many moments, Chris, but I think the resolve, the resilience, the belief, and the ability to stay connected through the adversity and kind of ignore that outside-in noise, especially in the midst of that 3-game losing skid where we went a month without winning a game.
Play of the year, probably, right? The post of Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, unbelievable. They end up zero blitzing you.
Give me the play call if you don't mind.
Yeah, right there, that was bunch right king, Jack's left rib, and it was spear with a blink on the backside.
Spear with blink on the backside.
Now, we had a much faster way of communicating that with some code words that might come up in a couple
you don't
weeks.
Have to tell me those. Yeah.
But what was great is, the guys did a great job. They were a little bit late hitting that pressure, and it was a time that we were able to, our guys were able to deliver in a big way. And you see Sue wins quickly up the middle. Murphy Bunting is coming free off the right side, and Matthew's able to throw off drift. And what a freaking throw he makes down the middle. And that's an example of all that time that those two spend together, Chris.
Right.
When you and a receiver have a rapport like that. And really, that's a throw that typically isn't made, but because of the zero structure, usually that is a, love of the game route as you've seen out there.
Right.
But, he's got great leverage on Winfield. He's digging out, and when those eyes get back and the trajectory underneath it, it was like it was dropped in a bucket perfectly. And you see the competitiveness on how quick he wanted people to get up and get that thing clocked,
No
too.
doubt. Yeah, he was yelling at, I think, Sony Michelle, right?
Get
your butt up there. What the hell are you doing? That was great. So now you're back in the Super Bowl. All right, second time in 4 years. What do you take away from the first experience that helps you with this time around?
Number one, I think appreciate the opportunity, but also understand that the job's not finished. I think when we ended up winning the game in New Orleans to advance and play New England, it's such a whirlwind. I think you have a much better perspective and understanding of how difficult it is too. This is the second year that I was in LA. The first year we had won the division. We lost in the wild card round to the Falcons, but everything had gone pretty well for us. We had a little bit of adversity even in that 18 season, but not understanding the totality of, all right, how do you want to, handle those 2 weeks? How do you best want to prepare? And I think most importantly, how do you want to make sure that you have a little bit more agility and adaptability throughout the course of the game, knowing that, hey, a guy like Coach Belichick is going to spring some different things on you, and you want to put your players in better spots sooner. Those are the things that I took away. I'm not going to run away from the fact that, hey, whether out-coach or didn't do a good enough job, those are true things. And I can handle that, but I'm excited about the opportunity that this team has earned to be here and to do a better job within the framework of my role for this team, with this other shot that these guys have done a great job earning.
So you talk about being able to adjust. That was the first time you went from kid genius to your self-proclaimed boy blunder comment, where you called
boy
yourself
wonder
that.
to boy blunder.
And I used to call you kid genius a lot. So Yeah, so that would be the thing you've taken away too, a little more flexibility in the game plan to adjust to however they're playing.
I think so. We did a lot of things that year that were, I don't want to say new, but it was different. And so there were some regulated looks that we had seen defensively. I think there's more things that we can do offensively as counters to it. Now, it's never perfect. I'm not going to claim to have all the answers, but I think just, all right, if they do this, what are the counters? What are the answers? What are the solves, if you will? I think you're better equipped with some solves based on the variety of different things that defenses can do to try to limit you in one area or the other and how they want to distribute and disperse those 11 defenders. And so, I think there's a little bit more, things that we can present as a result of having, the players that we have. And that's, the things that I would say is just the perspective, enjoying the opportunity, but understand, where is the focus and concentration on trying to go win this game with tremendous respect for the Bengals. And then when the game gets going, being totally and completely present and being able to see the game. If there's things that are different, how quickly can we get to those counters that put our guys in better spots? That's the biggest thing that resonates with me.
I got you. Okay. Yeah. All right. So, now with pressure in the Super Bowl, you talked about pressure of dealing with all the stars on your football team, how you handle that. Is there added pressure in a Super Bowl moment when you're the host team? The team in LA, do you feel anything different?
I don't think so. I think there's an urgency and there's an enjoyment with let's finish this job. I think there's a confidence that's been earned from this team. We've got some time now. We want to make sure that we're diligent, but we're doing a great job with our prep so that these guys can go into February 13th with a quieted mind. Go play confident, go play loose, but also, have that ability after good or bad to have that short memory and hit that reset button before every single play. And I think that's coaches and players alike.
You adjusted your schedule a little bit differently maybe from the first Super Bowl at all as far as how you're preparing for the game?
We did, Chris. And I think, especially just there's a little bit less limitations with regards to the media obligations just because of some of the COVID restrictions, things of that nature, and then also just being at home. And so how do you make sure that, you're not adding too much throughout the course of the 2 weeks, but getting the game plan finalized, but also keeping it fresh and new for these players, through these next 2 weeks of preparation. And it's a little bit different than when you're saying, all right, hey, let's get the majority of the plan in, and then we travel, and there's going to be a lot of different distractions, staying in a hotel, media night, all that kind of stuff. It'll be a little bit less obligations in that regard, so we can kind of spread some things out a little bit more.
Zach Taylor.
Yeah.
Guy from your coaching tree. First off, just, what does it mean to face a guy that, you're that familiar with and off of your own tree? I mean, you almost got to be proud a little bit, even though you want to beat his butt.
Yeah, no, we're competitors. What's cool about this, Chris, is you watch, and Zach and I have kept in great touch, since the 3 years that he's been there. But you see the mental toughness and the resolve that he's had as a leader, the consistent approach and the commitment to a philosophy and a belief. And then you get the right players, you understand, all right, you see their culture embodied. I think a lot of the things that are good about our team, I see reflected in their team. Mental toughness, resolve. There's a belief. You've got the right kind of guys that want the game on their back when it's crunch time. And I see that in those guys. And I didn't know Zach really too well other than just the respect I had watching the way he handled himself when he took over, when Dan Campbell was the interim head coach for the Dolphins and he became the OC. I really respected the way he handled that transition with class. Thought he did a really good job. And then I remember him as a baller at Nebraska. Because we're right around that same age. And you got a chance to get him on the staff. And, you talk about a guy who's got, great confidence in himself, but he's got an even-keeled demeanor and disposition, really a calm competitor. Learned a lot from Zach. I think we both positively poured into one another. And you're right. It's awesome, but we're going to try to get after him a little bit, and it's going to be two good teams going at it.
Do you have to go into a game like this with a guy that knows you a little bit, might know some of your code words or what you like to do against certain defenses? Is a phrase I use a lot, self-scout thyself.
Totally. Yeah. I think so. It helped. We played them in 19 a little bit, and I think really what he's done a great job of, and I think you see that from us, like we talked about a little bit earlier, is there are some, we've morphed a lot, and it's very different than maybe what it was in 18 the last time we were together. There's still some similarities in terms of how we want to try to run the football, what we're trying to do on early downs or in some of the known passing situations, but there is a lot of change. There's a lot of different code words, different things that we're doing. And you could see he's done the same thing with Burrow and their crew there. But you have an idea of, all right, the philosophical things, the way you want to prepare. But I think there is a fine line between overthinking that and just going and putting together a good sound plan, letting these players go execute and go enjoy the moment.
Aaron Donald.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a guy that grew up around Lawrence Taylor. And am I crazy to think, like, to me, Aaron Donald's in the club now with Reggie White, Lawrence Taylor, Ray Lewis, like the greatest defensive players of all time?
I think it's a fair thing to say. You know, I got so much respect for the history of this game, Chris, but here's what I tell people all the time. They ask me about Aaron Donald, and I say, as good as you think he is, and especially as you think he is, he's better. He's just, he's truly one of one. And the way that he goes about his business, how he is as a competitor, and I think he's even elevated himself even more this year as a leader, bringing people with him. You know, to be able to gather the defense up on the sideline, you watch, the focus and the concentration, the way that he prepares, the way he practices. He is truly, it's a blessing to be able to coach him. He is one of those guys why you want to work so hard to try to just help be a small part of him him having a chance to win a world championship. But he's one of one, and he's everything you could ever ask for in a superstar. The humility, the way he brings people with him. I feel so lucky to be with him.
I could see it. Like, I just saw him in the weight room.
Yeah.
Comes, says hi, has a smile, and then he's right back onto the grind. I mean, it's really got a special way about it.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, he's wired, as physically gifted as he is, he's just as gifted above the neck, with just, the intrinsic motivation that he has, the ability to push himself. The mental toughness is second to none, and he's outstanding.
Yeah. All right, you talked about, the pressure of having all these stars, and now, people expect, big things. We expect a Super Bowl. You got Odell and Vaughn. You should go to the Super Bowl now. How do you deal with that?
I think what you look at is growing up around this business like we both did, you realize that's a part of this business. And I think those leadership roles, there's naturally going to be always pressure that's kind of accompanying those roles. But for me, I look at it as, hey, I have such conviction and belief in the players, the coaches that I'm surrounded with, that it gives you confidence. And as long as you go compete to the best of your ability and you have no regrets, I don't worry too much about those things. I'm much better probably than I was a couple years ago about not worrying as much about the outside-in narrative. Every single team wants to try to win a Super Bowl. And if we feel like we're making decisions that do that, even if that means, the expectations, I think there's always internal pressure you put on yourself as a competitor. That really doesn't bother me. I just feel grateful, and I think the confidence I have in the people I'm around is what enables you to be able to say, hey, let's move forward, let's go shoot our shot, and let's see what the heck happens.
Yeah, you're going to be a crazy guy in here with X's and O's regardless, so it doesn't really matter.
That's exactly right.
Now it's Super Bowl 56. I mean, do you look at this as being a redemption for the loss in Super Bowl 53?
I don't know if I look at it like that. I look at it as what another great opportunity, to be able to try to share in, a possible special moment with people you really care about. I think the easiest thing for us, Chris, is, you see there's a lot of guys in this locker room, a lot of coaches that want to do it, for somebody other than themselves.
Right.
And, you talk about the Aaron Donalds of the world, the Matthew Staffords, Andrew Whitworths, Eric Weddle coming back, for this journey. Those are easy motivating factors because you love these guys so much. The Jalen Ramsey of the world, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, that you want to work as hard as you possibly can to watch them share in moments like what you felt with the NFC Championship, but knowing that, hey, I got to imagine it's that much sweeter. I have never done that, but I think it's because you get another opportunity. You're just grateful for it. You want to maximize it. Redemption, I don't really look at it. You want to make sure you learn from the previous mistakes. But I just feel grateful that we're here, but I also understand that, hey, we want to try to do everything in our power to finish this deal.
Well, I'm going to jump off on one other thing here, just like, the mindset you have here. You just slayed a dragon in some ways. I mean, apparently Shanahan was living in your head rent-free, right?
Yeah,
I mean, all that
right.
crap, right? How did you get your team to kind of overcome that mentally to get here in the Super Bowl?
Well, I think our guys know, Kyle and the 49ers, they're a great team.
Right.
People want to ask all the time, what is it with them? They're a really good team.
Yeah.
I mean, they're tough. They do a great job. You know how much respect I have for Kyle and what he is as a coach and the schematics. But then you also have a vision with the players that fit that mold that he and John have built there. And and then when you look at the games, they've done a great job finishing. There's been a couple of those where they ended up beating us, but in a handful of them, it's been a back and forth good battle where, hey, let's finish it.
Right.
And we all know from growing up in this game, it's not necessarily anything other than let's play the best we can in this 3.5-hour window of time. And I think our guys believe that. And I think that was reflected in when we went down 17-7.
Yeah.
And the guys just kept competing, and they competed all the way to the end, and they found a way to close it out 20-17. But we had tremendous respect for the 49ers. They're a really good team. That's why they were in the NFC Championship. But it was great because it allowed us to be able to advance.
Yeah.
And I think our guys were able to compartmentalize that, hey, those previous games, that this is a team you respect a lot, but what we do in that 3.5-hour window of time has nothing to do with anything except for being in that moment, and that's what our guys did.
Right. All right, your growth as a coach. I mean, again, you from John Gruden early days, and now here you are, like the man. Just, talk about your growth over these years.
I think, the experience is the biggest thing. Learning from both the good and the bad. I think early on, everything was roses. And I think sometimes, those scars that you develop, from the mistakes you've made or the adversity that you go through can harden you in a good way if you take it the right way. And when you're surrounded with people that you really care about and you're able to look at it and take accountability for where your role falls in the framework of, hey, we didn't do a good enough job, or I didn't do a good enough job. But, being able to use all those experiences to gain the perspective, the appreciation, and then also just continuing to understand, how important it is to be surrounded with great people. The players, the coaches, I have so many great people that I can really lean on that have been a huge part of us being in a position to compete, for a world championship. But I think more than anything, the experience used the right way, both learning from the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.